In part two, we're going to quickly jump from Bangkok to Okinawa and look into how Okinawa's location is so odd compared to Japan and the rest of the region, and also discuss how Japan fell from its might of the 90s. Breakfast time. A good morning. Edge of Japan, Okinawa, a few hundred miles from Taiwan actually. Tons of activity here. Tokyo to Naha 966 miles. Osaka even closer 726 miles. Fukuoka 536 miles only. But wait for this, the actual closest major city is Taipei at 407 miles away. Taipei, Taiwan is much closer to Okinawa than the rest of Japan. There's something strange about Japan. You can arrive here and immediately understand why people love it. The food, the cities, the trains, the streets, the architecture, the countryside, the culture, it's all unique. But underneath all of this, there's a feeling that Japan should have been much more powerful. But Japan has just stopped winning. And there's a difference there. Japan entered the 1990s from an extraordinary position. At the end of the 1980s, Japan looked unstoppable. It was the world's second largest economy. Japanese companies dominated automobiles, electronics, cameras, machinery, consumer technology. And Tokyo was the world's greatest city and the world's greatest financial center. Japanese banks were enormous, and Japanese companies were buying America's real estate, including Hollywood studios and iconic buildings. Now, this is where it gets amazingly interesting. Everyone thought Japan is on its way to overtake America. Then the bubble burst, and Japan made a decision that would shape today's Japan till this day and probably onwards. Rather than aggressively destroying the old system and rebuilding around a new economy, it spent decades trying to preserve it. Zombie companies survived. Banks were protected. Labor markets remained rigid. Property values collapsed. Deflation became entrenched. And an entire generation learned to expect very little inflation, very little wage growth, and very little economic change. Japan became incredibly good at stability, but that was the objective, not growth, not change, not improvement, and not curing the diseases that it had. And this is where it all connects to the short distance to Taiwan and Korea for that matter. Taiwan and Korea had much less to begin with. They did not have Tokyo, they did not have Japan's enormous corporate champions, they did not have Tokyo's accumulated wealth, and they had something Japan increasingly lacked: urgency. Korea understood that Samsung could not remain a cheap electronic manufacturer, and it had to become a global technology company. Taiwan understood that manufacturing alone wasn't enough. It had to move into semiconductors, advanced manufacturing, and eventually become one of the most strategically important technology ecosystems on Earth. Both countries repeatedly reinvented themselves. Japan repeatedly preferred to protect what it already had. Now, one more major difference: both countries have a domestic minor economy. It is nothing like Japan. Japan's internal economy, the domestic economy, is huge for itself. Those countries did not have that. Those companies had to be export oriented. Japanese companies could be big enough and work on the domestic market. Now, this is a Japanese paradox. Japan is still extremely great at making stuff. Japan created the Walkman, consumer electronics revolution, Canon, Nikon, Panasonic, Toshiba, Sharp, Hitachi, Fujitsu, They're all Japanese. But then the digital revolution arrived, and suddenly the center of gravity has moved. Software, internet platforms, smartphones, cloud, AI, semis, digital finance. Japan remained a manufacturing superpower, but it became increasingly a follower in those new technologies, tomorrow's technologies. Meanwhile, Korea built Samsung, Taiwan built TSMC, and the contrast was extraordinary. Japan invented some of the technologies. Taiwan and Korea, with enormous businesses, took over the next generation. Japan lost the smartphone battle. They were leading at the beginning. Some of the best phones in the early 2000s were Japanese smartphones. NEC, Sharp, Fujitsu, Toshiba. They were leading the world. But eventually the iPhone arrived. Japan stayed where it was, and the world took over without Japanese technology. Japan also missed the internet economy. It had no Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, and the only thing that was coming up was Chinese companies. So Japan's domestic success became a trap, and Taiwan at the same time did the opposite. Taiwan's market was too small to hide. A Taiwanese technology company had to sell to the world. That created a different mentality. TSMC is the perfect example. Taiwan did not try to build the next Intel, it created an entirely new business model. We manufacture the world's most advanced chips for everyone else. That was genius. Apple needs Taiwan, Nvidia needs Taiwan, AMD needs Taiwan, Qualcomm needs Taiwan. Even companies that compete with each other need the same Taiwanese ecosystem. Taiwan turned itself into something the world could not easily replace. Japan had once occupied a similar position across multiple industries. Korea did something even more remarkable since Korea understood branding. Instead of becoming an OEM country like Taiwan, it went for global domination. Samsung, which previously was associated with the cheap consumer electronics, became one of the world's most important technology companies. Hyundai went from producing inexpensive cars to competing with Mercedes, BMW, and Toyota. LG became a global consumer electronic company. And then their true exports, K-pop, K-drama, K-beauty, K-food, K-fashion. Korea turned its culture into an economic industry. Japan previously was in a deeper cultural reservoir, but Japan often treated culture as something to preserve, not to export. Korea treated culture as something to commercialize globally. In part 3, we're going to visit the former Japanese Navy underground headquarters. Stay tuned.